The boardroom smelled like Italian leather and fresh lilies. 14 chairs filled with people who had never once looked at the man sitting at the far end of the table. Elena Barrett stood at the head of the room, her gray-blue eyes scanning each face the way a surgeon studies an X-ray, searching for the fracture nobody wanted to admit existed. The quarterly operations review was supposed to last 40 minutes. It would last 11. On the projection screen behind her, a systems architecture diagram glowed in clean blue lines. The distribution optimization model that had saved Barrett and Associates $4.2 million in its first year. Every person in this room had praised it. None of them knew who built it. Elena's voice cut through the ambient hum of the ventilation system, steady and surgical. Before we begin, I want to address something. She clicked to a blank slide. For 18 months, this company has operated on systems credited to people who didn't create them. The distribution model, the vendor prediction framework, the warehouse restructuring protocol from last March, all authored by one person. She paused, letting the silence do what silence does best, make powerful people uncomfortable. That person is in this room, and not one of you has ever asked his name. 14 heads turned, scanning, calculating. The man at the far end of the table did not look up. His hands were folded, his breathing even, his posture the practiced stillness of someone who had learned long ago that invisibility was a form of survival. His name was Marcus Cole. And 11 months ago, none of this had happened yet. And the alarm on Marcus's phone went off at 5:47 every morning, 13 minutes before it needed to, because those 13 minutes were the only time the apartment belonged entirely to silence. A one-bedroom unit on the east side of Charlotte, $1,100 a month, 612 square feet split between a man who couldn't sleep and a daughter who slept like the world owed her nothing but safety. He reached for his phone on the nightstand, opened the banking app out of muscle memory, and watched the number load. $847.23. Rent was paid through the 15th. Electric was $62 overdue. Maya's health insurance, $185. Hit Friday. The math didn't work. It never worked. He did it anyway because doing the math was the closest thing he had to a prayer. Beside the phone, a framed photograph. Marcus and Denise on their wedding day, her in a cream dress she'd found at a consignment shop in Raleigh, him in his father's suit with the sleeves let out. She was laughing, her head thrown back, her hand pressed flat against his chest like she was trying to hold his heartbeat in her palm. Denise Cole died of stage 3 breast cancer 14 months after diagnosis, 3 years before this morning. And Marcus still kept her photograph angled so that it was the first thing he saw when he woke and the last thing he saw before the dark. He did not linger on it. Lingering was a luxury that cost more than $62. Maya was already at the kitchen table when he came out. A 7-year-old hurricane of focus bent over a solar system model made from foam balls and acrylic paint. Saturn's rings were drying on a paper towel crafted from a cut-up cereal box and aluminum foil. More imagination than accuracy, but more beautiful for it. She looked up with the gap-toothed grin that made every unpaid bill feel temporarily irrelevant. Dad, did you know Saturn's rings are mostly ice? Not rocks. Everybody thinks rocks, but it's ice. Her voice carried the specific authority of a child who has recently learned something that adults get wrong, which is to say, total conviction. Marcus poured oatmeal into 2 bowls, one with brown sugar, one without. Kind of like people, huh? Everybody assumes one thing, but the truth is different. Maya squinted at him. You're being weird deep again. He set the bowl in front of her. Eat your oatmeal, scientist. The Honda Civic had 187,000 miles on it, a check engine light that had been on since October, and a passenger seat that still smelled faintly of the lavender lotion Denise used to keep in the glove compartment. Marcus drove Maya to Westbrook Elementary, pulled into the drop-off lane, and leaned across to kiss her forehead. She grabbed her backpack, the solar system model balanced carefully in both hands, and ran toward the entrance without looking back, because she was 7 and the world had not yet given her a reason to hesitate. He sat in the car for 30 seconds after she disappeared through the double doors, not thinking, not grieving, just being still in the space between who he was at home and who he was required to be everywhere else. Barrett and Associates occupied floors 10 through 14 of the Callaway Building in Uptown Charlotte. 340 employees, annual revenue of $180 million. Founded 30 years ago by Richard Barrett, now run by his daughter. Marcus badged in at 8:22, employee ID number 0741, senior operations analyst, level 3, salary $67,400, hired 4 years and 3 months ago, promoted 0 times. 12 black employees worked at Barrett and Associates. None held a title above senior analyst. Marcus had done the count himself, not out of suspicion, but out of the quiet habit of a man who had learned to map the terrain before trusting it. He walked the 12th floor hallway the way he walked every hallway in this building. Eyes forward, a posture open but not assertive, nodding at colleagues who sometimes nodded back. 2 returned the greeting. 4 glanced past him with the polite blankness of people who recognize a face but have never bothered to attach a name to it. 1 did not look up at all. The weekly operations meeting began at 10 on the dot. 9 people, the long conference table on 12, Whitfield at the head. Greg Whitfield, 52, Senior Vice President of Operations. The kind of man who wore authority like a coat that fit well enough that nobody questioned whether it was his. He had a firm handshake, a membership at the Quail Hollow Club, and a talent for presenting other people's work as if the ideas had occurred to him in the shower. On the screen, slide 1 of a 12-slide deck titled Distribution Optimization, Phase 2 Strategy. Marcus recognized it the way a parent recognizes a child's handwriting. He had built this model across 147 hours, most of them between 10 at night and 2 in the morning while Maya slept, using a Weibull distribution framework he'd adapted from a supply chain journal article and 3 semesters of graduate-level statistics he'd completed online before Denise got sick and money became a thing you counted in days rather than degrees. He had emailed the finished model to Whitfield on March 14th. Subject line, Draft. Distribution Optimization Model V2.3, Marcus Cole. Whitfield's version had a new font and no attribution. Marcus took notes. He did not look up. On slide 4, a colleague from logistics asked the question Marcus had anticipated. Why use a Weibull distribution instead of standard normal for demand forecasting? Whitfield paused. 4 seconds of silence that only Marcus could measure for what they were, the silence of a man reaching for knowledge that lived in someone else's mind. He turned. Marcus, you helped pull some of the data on this. Can you walk us through the distribution piece? Helped pull some of the data. 147 hours reduced to data pulling. Marcus's expression did not change. He spoke evenly, the way a man speaks when he has learned that competence must be delivered without the faintest trace of pride. The Weibull distribution accounts for variable failure rates over time, which standard normal Can't capture in supply chain contexts. Our vendor delivery variance follows a shape parameter of 1.7 with a scale of 14.3 days. That gives us 89% accuracy on late shipment prediction compared to 61% under the previous model. Nobody spoke. Rachel Torres, Director of Analytics, 41, the only person in this building who had ever sent Marcus a follow-up email that included the words, "Your analysis," watched Whitfield's face absorb the answer like a man pocketing someone else's change. Whitfield nodded. Right. Like I said, the model is solid. The meeting moved on. In the hallway afterward, Rachel matched Marcus's pace. That was your model. All of it. Her voice was low, not conspiratorial, but precise. The voice of a woman who understood the difference between institutional silence and institutional consent. Marcus kept walking. It doesn't matter whose name is on it. The work gets done. Rachel stopped. He took 2 more steps before her words reached him. It matters, Marcus. It matters who gets credit and who gets erased. He looked at her for a moment, then turned the corner toward his desk. Rachel Torres was the first person in 4 years to use the word erased, and she had no idea how deep the erasure went. That evening, 12 floors above Marcus's cubicle, Elena Barrett sat in an office she had inherited along with the company, the corner view, and 3 decades of decisions she was only beginning to understand. The office was too large for one person, and she knew it. Under the same way she knew that the 4-bedroom house in Myers Park was too large and too quiet, and that she stayed at this desk until 9 or 10 most nights because the silence here felt purposeful while the silence at home felt like an accusation. She opened the slide deck from the morning meeting, clicked File, then Properties, and read the metadata. Original author, Marcus Cole. Last modified by Greg Whitfield. Date modified 2 days before the presentation. She opened the internal email server. Search Marcus Cole. 23 emails in 6 months, all sent to Whitfield, all containing analysis, models, proposals, not one forwarded to the CEO. She called Rachel Torres at 4:30. The distribution model Whitfield presented today. Who actually built it? Rachel did not hesitate. Marcus Cole, Operations Analyst, Level 3. He's been here 4 years. Elena leaned back. 4 years, and I've never had a direct conversation with him. Rachel's voice carried the weight of someone choosing her next words carefully. Most people haven't. He keeps his head down. Literally. Elena stayed until 9:47 that night. She opened the HR system, pulled personnel records, ran the searches she hadn't known she needed to run until today. What she found was not a single oversight. It was arithmetic. 19 black employees had applied for promotion in 6 years. 0 approved. 34% of white employees at the same level were promoted in the same window. 73 internal complaints filed about discriminatory practices from 19 different employees across 4 departments. Every one of them stamped with the same red text. Reviewed. No action required. 68 of the 73 signed by Greg Whitfield. All confirmed by Linda Chen, HR Director, without a single follow-up interview. She closed the laptop. Her hands were shaking, and the quiet of the building felt different now. Not peaceful, but complicit. As if the walls themselves had been keeping a secret she should have found years ago. At 10:15, Marcus unlocked the apartment door. Maya had fallen asleep on the sofa with a library book open on her chest. The Magic School Bus and the Climate Challenge. And his mother-in-law, Denise's mother, was dozing in the armchair beside her, the television on mute. He lifted Maya carefully, carried her to the bedroom, and pulled the blanket to her chin. She stirred, eyes half open. "Dad, a boy at school said you clean toilets. I told him you're an analyst. He said that's the same thing." Marcus kept his face steady, the way he kept it steady in meetings, in hallways, in every room where steadiness was the only armor he could afford. He kissed her forehead. "You know what an analyst does, baby?" Her voice was thick with sleep. "Solves problems." He smoothed her hair. "That's right. And some problems take longer than others." She was asleep before he finished the sentence. He sat on the floor beside her bed, his back against the frame, and stared at the ceiling the way he had stared at ceilings for 3 years. Not praying exactly, but talking to a woman who could no longer answer. My daughter was 7 years old, and already learning that the world would see her father's skin before his mind. Denise, if you're listening, I don't know how much longer I can keep my head down. But Marcus didn't know that 12 floors above his cubicle, in an office that smelled like cold coffee and 30 years of accumulated silence, Elena Barrett was staring at 73 names on a screen, and his was the one she kept coming back to. 2 weeks after Elena Barrett discovered 73 names buried in a system designed to forget them, Marcus Cole's phone rang at 2:15 on a Tuesday afternoon. Westbrook Elementary. The voice on the other end belonged to a secretary who spoke in the careful tone of someone reading from a liability script. Maya had been involved in a physical altercation. He needed to come immediately. He found her in the principal's office, sitting in a plastic chair that was too big for her body, her lower lip swollen on the left side, her hands folded in her lap the way she folded them when she was trying very hard not to cry in front of strangers. Across the room, a boy named Tyler sat with his mother, untouched, picking at a loose thread on his backpack strap. The principal, a woman in her 50s with reading glasses pushed up into silver hair, explained the situation the way institutions explain situations when the outcome has already been decided. Tyler had made a comment. Maya had pushed Tyler. Tyler had pushed Maya back, harder, which accounted for the lip. Maya was being suspended for 1 day. Tyler would receive a verbal warning. Marcus looked at his daughter's swollen mouth, then at the boy's unmarked face, then at the principal. His voice came out the way water moves through limestone, slow and deliberate, and wearing away something that thought itself permanent. "You're telling me my daughter, who was verbally provoked, who pushed second, and who is the only one in this room with a visible injury, is the only one being disciplined." The principal shifted behind her desk. "Maya initiated physical contact, Mr. Cole." Marcus nodded, the way a man nods when he is counting silently to a number only he knows. A push is not a punch. And a verbal warning for the boy who called her father a charity case teaches him that cruelty is free as long as the target is small enough. The principal began a sentence that started with, "I understand your concern," and Marcus let her finish it. Because interrupting would give her a story to tell about an aggressive parent, and he had learned long ago that the rules of engagement were different when your skin made people reach for adjectives like threatening before they reached for your name. He stood, extended his hand to Maya, and spoke clearly enough that the words would live in this woman's memory, whether she wanted them to or not. "I'll be filing a formal complaint referencing Section 4.2 of your student handbook, which requires identical consequences for identical actions. I read it last night. I read everything." In the car, Maya held a frozen juice box from her lunchbox against her lip. Am I in trouble? Her voice was small, the smallness of a child who has just learned that the world has rules she didn't write and can't appeal. Marcus pulled out of the school parking lot, his knuckles tight on the wheel, his voice deliberately gentle. No, baby. You stood up for yourself. Next time, use words first. But no, you are not in trouble. She was quiet for a half mile. Then, Dad, why do people say things like that? He drove another 100 yards before answering, because the truth deserved more than a reflex. Because they haven't learned yet. Some people never do. But you will. And that's the difference. He watched her in the rearview mirror, 7 years old with a busted lip and a solar system project due Thursday, and something shifted behind his sternum. Not anger exactly, something colder. The recognition that the system he navigated at Barrett and Associates and the system his daughter was learning to navigate at Westbrook Elementary were not two systems. They were one, and it ran on the same fuel. The assumption that certain people's pain was less expensive than the inconvenience of addressing it. While Marcus was driving his daughter home with a swollen lip and a juice box compress, Greg Whitfield was sitting in his office reading an email from Elena Barrett for the third time. The message was 4 sentences long. Please send me all performance reviews you've authored in the last 3 years. Include any supporting documentation, calibration notes, and correspondence with HR regarding outcomes. I need these by Friday. Thank you. No context, no warmth. 4 sentences that landed in Whitfield's inbox like the first crack in a frozen lake. He picked up his phone and called Linda Chen. His voice had the controlled pitch of a man accustomed to managing situations rather than being managed by them. Elena's digging. She asked for every review I've written in 3 years. Linda was quiet for 2 beats. All of them? Whitfield confirmed. He told her about the late nights, the personnel files, the way Elena had been staying past 10 with her door closed. Linda's response was slower, more careful. The response of someone calculating distance from an approaching fire. Greg, how many complaints have you signed off on? His answer came without hesitation. They were handled according to policy. Linda's voice flattened. Your policy or the company's? Because if she cross-references with the actual federal framework, Title VII, 42 U.S.C. Section 2000E, our stamp isn't going to hold. Whitfield leaned back. Richard Barrett built this company on structure and loyalty. His daughter isn't going to dismantle 30 years of infrastructure over one analyst. He believed it when he said it. That was the most dangerous part. Monday morning, 9 o'clock, Marcus received a calendar invitation from Elena Barrett's executive assistant. Subject, meeting with CEO. No agenda, no context. He had never been inside the corner office. The door was heavier than he expected. The kind of door designed to remind you that the person behind it controlled things you did not. Elena sat behind a desk that was too large for any single purpose, her laptop open, a printed folder beside it, 3 years of performance evaluations fanned across the surface like evidence in a case that hadn't yet been named. She looked at him the way no one in this building had looked at him in 4 years, directly. Mr. Cole, I'm going to ask you a question, and I need an honest answer. Marcus's posture was still, his breathing measured. Yes, ma'am. Elena turned her laptop so he could see the screen. File properties, his name in the author field, Whitfield's in the modifier field. The distribution optimization model, the vendor prediction system, the warehouse restructuring framework from last March. Were they yours? 3 seconds passed. In those seconds, Marcus performed the calculation he had been performing since his first week at Barrett and Associates. The cost of truth versus the cost of silence, measured not in dollars, but in proximity to the exit. He looked up, met her eyes for the first time. Gray-blue, direct, carrying something he hadn't expected to find in a CEO's gaze. Not pity, not suspicion, but the specific exhaustion of a person who has just discovered that the house they inherited has been rotting from the inside. Yes, ma'am, they were mine. Elena pushed the printed folder across the desk. This is every complaint filed by a black employee at this company in the past 6 years. 73 total. Every single one was closed without action. I need someone who understands systems, real systems, to help me understand how deep this goes. Marcus looked at the folder, then at her. Why me? Elena's answer was immediate. Because you're the most qualified person in this building who has no reason to protect the people responsible. They began that week. Elena set up an encrypted internal channel accessible only to the two of them. Marcus worked from the small conference room adjacent to her office, arriving after most employees left, carrying files in a laptop bag that nobody questioned because nobody paid attention to what a level 3 analyst carried. 3 weeks compressed into a rhythm of late nights, cold coffee, and the slow, methodical work of translating institutional betrayal into numbers that could not be argued with. What Marcus found was not a scandal. It was a machine. 19 black employees denied promotion over 6 years, each rejection stamped with identical language, not yet demonstrating leadership readiness. The phrase appeared verbatim in every file, copy-pasted like a template, because it was one. 12 employees terminated within 90 days of filing complaints, official reason listed as restructuring, and their positions reposted and filled within 60 days. Whitfield controlled the evaluation pipeline across 3 departments, influencing outcomes for 89 employees. Linda Chen co-signed every HR closure without conducting a single interview with any complainant. And buried in a 2019 email thread between Whitfield and Chen, 5 words that turned a pattern into a conspiracy. Keep the numbers clean. Richard doesn't need the headache. Richard Barrett, Elena's father, the founder. Marcus laid the evidence on Elena's desk at 11:47 on a Thursday night. She read for 22 minutes without speaking, without moving, without doing anything except absorbing the dimensions of what her family's company had built beneath its polished surface. When she looked up, her eyes were wet and her jaw was set, a combination Marcus recognized because he had seen it in his own mirror on the nights when grief and determination became indistinguishable. My father knew? Her voice was quiet, not broken, but stripped of the insulation that authority provides. Marcus answered carefully, because the truth deserved precision, not cushioning. The email suggests he was aware of the pattern. Whether he directed it or allowed it, I can't determine from the documents alone. Elena's response came fast, almost sharp. Don't protect me from the truth, Marcus. I didn't bring you into this for comfort. He held her gaze. Your father may have built this company, but you're the one who decides what it becomes. Something shifted in the room, not dramatic, not cinematic. Quiet, the way tectonic plates shift, invisible until you see what they've moved. Elena looked at Marcus and saw, perhaps for the first time, the full architecture of what he was. A man who had been robbed of credit for 4 years, who supported a daughter alone on $67,000 in a city that costs $80,000, who had lost his wife to a disease that took 14 months to kill her, and would take the rest of his life to grieve, and who sat in this office at midnight helping the CEO dismantle the system that had crushed him, not with anger, not with vengeance, but with the unbearable patience of someone who believed that evidence was more durable than rage. Marcus did not just compile the evidence. He rebuilt what should have existed. 47 pages. A complete performance evaluation framework. 23 measurable metrics replacing 14 subjective criteria. Blind review protocols. Cross-departmental calibration sessions. Implementation cost, $34,000. Projected litigation risk reduction, 91%. Annual retention savings from reduced minority employee turnover, $280,000. He presented it to Elena alone in the small conference room on a Tuesday at 9 p.m. She studied the document for 11 minutes. "You built this in 3 weeks?" His answer was the quietest kind of indictment. "I built the first version 2 years ago. Nobody asked to see it." Whitfield moved on a Wednesday. He had noticed Marcus accessing the 12th floor after hours 3 times in 2 weeks, and his survival instincts, sharpened by 3 decades of protecting territory he hadn't earned, activated in sequence. First, an email to HR flagging Marcus for after-hours access policy violations. "I'm requesting immediate suspension pending review." Second, 3 phone calls to former colleagues at competing firms, each one containing Marcus's name and the suggestion that he was difficult, disruptive, not a culture fit. The corporate vocabulary of informal blacklisting. Third, and this was the line, he called the emergency contact listed in Marcus's personnel file, Denise's mother. He identified himself as a Barrett & Associates representative, conducting a routine security verification, and asked questions about Marcus's schedule, his home situation, his daughter. Marcus came home to find his mother-in-law sitting at the kitchen table with her hands wrapped around a coffee mug she wasn't drinking, to her face carrying the particular anxiety of a woman who had already lost her daughter and measured every phone call against the possibility of losing more. "Someone from your company called, said it was a security check, asked about your hours, about Maya." She looked up. "Marcus, what's happening?" He sat down across from her, placed his hands flat on the table, and breathed through the fury the way he had breathed through every indignity of the past 4 years, converting it from heat into something harder and more useful. At 10:22 that night, he called Elena from the parking lot of his apartment complex, standing beside the Civic in the dark. "He called my daughter's grandmother. He went after my family." Elena's silence lasted 4 seconds. When she spoke, her voice had lost every trace of corporate diplomacy. "Then we move faster. How soon can the full report be ready?" Marcus looked up at the window of Maya's bedroom, where the glow of a nightlight made a small, warm square in the dark. "It's ready now." Elena's response was immediate. "I'm calling a board meeting, Monday, 9 a.m. Saturday afternoon, Elena drove 40 minutes to the assisted living facility in Mooresville, where Richard Barrett had lived since his stroke 3 years ago. He sat in a wheelchair by the window, thinner than the photographs in the corporate lobby remembered him, his speech reduced to fragments by the damage in his left hemisphere. His mind, however, was intact. Elena sat across from him, the folder on her lap, and told him what she had found. Not accusingly, factually, the 73 complaints, the template language, the email, his name. Richard Barrett looked at his daughter with eyes that carried 30 years of decisions he could no longer explain and no longer defend. His mouth worked around the words the way a man works around a stone. Afraid. Company. Gone. Elena took his hand, the hand that had signed the incorporation papers in 1994, that had shaken hands with the governor, that had held her mother's hand in the hospital the year the company went public, and Margaret Barrett was dying of the same loneliness that large success inflicts on the people closest to it. The company won't be gone, Dad, but it will be different. It has to be. He nodded. A tear slipped from his right eye, the side of his face that still moved. She kissed his forehead and walked out, carrying the weight of his silence on her shoulders and the strange, terrible freedom of knowing she was no longer bound by it. Sunday night, the office, every window dark except Elena's. The folder sat between them on the conference table, 247 pages, 73 cases, 6 years of institutional silence organized into sections and cross-referenced with federal statutes. Marcus checked the final exhibit. Elena reviewed the board presentation. The work was done. What remained was everything else. Elena spoke first. Marcus, after tomorrow, whatever happens, you won't report to me anymore. I'm restructuring the chain of command so there's no conflict. He looked at her. Conflict of interest for what? She met his eyes, and the answer lived in the space between the question and the silence that followed. For what I feel. For what I've felt since the night you showed me those 73 names and didn't look away. Marcus set his pen down. Elena, I'm a black man making $67,000 a year. You're the CEO of a $180 million company. I have a 7-year-old and $847 in the bank. You have a board of directors and a last name on the building. The world will say, I'm using you. Elena didn't break his gaze. And the world will say I'm exploiting you. So what? Since when do we let people who've never loved anything decide what love looks like? Marcus was quiet for a long time. I stopped looking down 3 weeks ago, and every time I look at you, I forget you're my CEO. I see the woman who chose 73 strangers over her own legacy, yet the woman who is about to terrify a 30-year institution because it's the right thing to do. I see someone I have no business falling for. He paused. But I am. Elena's voice dropped to something barely above breath. Then we do this right. Tomorrow, we fix the company. After, we figure out us. No hiding, no secrets, no looking down. At 9:30 that night, Marcus sat on Maya's bedroom floor while she brushed her teeth. She came back in pajamas covered in cartoon planets, climbed into bed, and looked at him with the unnerving clarity that children deploy without warning. Dad, are you nervous about tomorrow? He almost lied. Almost. A little. She pulled the blanket up. Remember what Mom used to say? His throat tightened. What did Mom say? Maya smiled, the gap in her teeth visible even in the dim glow of the nightlight. When the truth doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be said. He turned off the light, sat in the hallway, looked at the photograph of Denise on his phone, the same image that served as his lock screen, his home screen, his compass. Tomorrow, Denise. Tomorrow I say it all. At 8:47 Monday morning, 14 people would sit in a boardroom expecting a routine quarterly review. They would receive coffee, printed agendas, and the comfortable assumption that the next 40 minutes would unfold the way every meeting at Barrett and Associates had unfolded for 30 years. They had no idea that in 13 minutes, a man they had never bothered to see would stand at the front of the room, look every one of them in the eye, and change the trajectory of a $180 million company with nothing but the truth and 247 pages of proof. The boardroom filled in the order boardrooms always fill, by rank, by habit, by the invisible choreography of people who believe their seats are earned rather than assigned. 4 board members took the east side. 6 department heads filled the west. Linda Chen sat near the door, her posture the careful stillness of someone who has already begun calculating exits. Greg Whitfield took his usual chair, third from the head, adjusting his cuffs with the mechanical confidence of a man who has survived 30 years of meetings by never once being the least powerful person in the room. Rachel Torres sat across from him, a legal pad open, her pen uncapped. And at the far end, in the last chair, Marcus Cole. Elena Barrett entered at 9 sharp, closed the door herself rather than leaving it for her assistant, and remained standing. No printed agenda had been distributed. No coffee service had been arranged. The projection screen behind her displayed a single slide, a white background, the Barrett and Associates logo, and beneath it, a name none of them expected, Marcus Cole, Senior Operations Analyst, Level 3, Employee ID 0741. Before we begin the quarterly review, Elena's voice carried the specific calm of someone who has already grieved the version of the future she is about to destroy. There is a matter that requires the board's immediate attention. I've asked Mr. Cole to present. Whitfield's chin lifted. His eyes moved from Elena to Marcus and back. The rapid calculation of a man whose threat detection system has just registered movement in a direction he hadn't guarded. Ms. Barrett, this is a senior leadership session. I wasn't aware Level 3 analysts were presenting to the board. Elena did not look at him. He's here because he designed the systems this company runs on, and because he's about to show you something you should have seen 6 years ago. Marcus stood, walked to the front of the room. 14 faces turned toward him, most of them seeing him for the first time, despite 4 years of shared hallways and elevator rides and Monday morning meetings in which he had occupied the margins like furniture. He did not rush. He did not perform. Was he stood the way a man stands when he has decided that the next 10 minutes will cost him everything, or give him back the thing he lost when he first learned to keep his eyes on the floor? My name is Marcus Cole. I've been employed at Barrett and Associates for 4 years and 3 months as a senior operations analyst. During that time, I've authored 3 core operational systems that have reduced company costs by $4.2 million annually. My name appears on none of them. He paused. Let the math settle into the silence. But I'm not here to discuss attribution. I'm here to talk about 73 people. The screen changed. A spreadsheet, rows of dates, department codes, complaint categories, and a single status column filled with identical red text. Reviewed, no action required. Over the past 6 years, and 73 internal complaints regarding discriminatory practices were filed by 19 different employees across 4 departments. Every complaint was closed without investigation. No complainant was interviewed. No corrective action was taken. He advanced the slide. 2 columns appeared side by side, 19 names on the left, each paired with the same phrase on the right. 19 black employees applied for promotion during this period. 0 were approved. Each rejection cites identical language, not yet demonstrating leadership readiness. The phrase was not individually assessed, or it was copied and pasted across files spanning 3 years. The room had gone still in the particular way that rooms go still when the people inside them realize they are no longer attending a meeting, but witnessing something that will be discussed in depositions. Marcus advanced again. 12 employees were terminated within 90 days of filing complaints. Official cause, restructuring. Each of their positions was reposted and filled within 60 days. Next slide. A bar chart. Promotion rates by demographic. White employees at equivalent levels, 34%. Black employees, 0. The visual needed no narration. Marcus looked at Whitfield, then at Linda Chen. His voice did not rise. It did not need to. The evaluation pipeline for 3 departments, affecting 89 employees, was controlled by one person. Why, every HR closure was co-signed by one person. Neither conducted a single follow-up interview. He let the silence hold their names before he said them. Mr. Whitfield authored the evaluations. Mrs. Chen signed the closures. The final slide appeared. An email. Date: March 2019. From G. Whitfield to L. Chen. 5 words that turned a pattern into architecture. Keep the numbers clean. Richard doesn't need the headache. Whitfield was on his feet before the murmur finished crossing the room. His face had shifted from composure to something rawer. The expression of a man who has just discovered that the walls he built are not between him and the enemy, but between him and the exit. This is absurd. Elena, you're allowing a junior employee to make accusations without due process, without legal review, without... Elena's voice cut through his like a blade through paper. Sit down, Greg. The 2 words filled the room the way oxygen fills a vacuum, completely and without negotiation. Whitfield sat, not because he chose to, because the architecture of authority he had relied on for 30 years had just shifted its foundation out from under him, and for the first time, the chair was the only thing holding him up. Elena moved to the front of the room beside Marcus. I have personally verified every data point in this presentation against source records. An external audit firm, Hayes and Porter, begins a full independent review tomorrow. Our legal counsel has been briefed on potential Title VII violations under 42 U.S.C. Section 2000E. She looked at Whitfield. Mr. Whitfield, your employment is terminated effective immediately. Ms. Chen, you are suspended pending the outcome of the external investigation. Security will escort you both from the building. Whitfield's last attempt at leverage came out thin, reflexive, the muscle memory of a man reaching for a weapon he no longer possessed. Your father would never have allowed this. Elena held his gaze for 3 full seconds. My father is the reason we're in this room, and I'm the reason it ends here. Security arrived within 4 minutes. Whitfield left without speaking. Linda Chen left carrying a single box. Rachel Torres, who had been writing steadily throughout the presentation, set down her pen and began to applaud. 1 person joined her, then 3. Then the room, uneven and uncertain at first, then full. The sound of people acknowledging something they had known and not said for longer than any of them would later admit. Marcus did not acknowledge the applause. He gathered the printed exhibits, closed the laptop, and returned to his seat at the end of the table. He had not raised his voice once. The week that followed moved at the speed of consequence. Whitfield filed a wrongful termination suit on Wednesday. His attorney withdrew the claim by Friday after reviewing the evidence packet Elena's legal team provided in discovery. Linda Chen cooperated fully with the external auditors, providing supplementary documentation that expanded the scope of the investigation from 1 department to 3. The EEOC opened a formal inquiry after Elena filed a voluntary disclosure, the first in Barrett and Associates' 30-year history. 3 regional news outlets ran the story under variations of the same headline. CEO exposes discrimination inside her own company. The Charlotte Observer quoted an employment law professor at Duke who called it the rarest thing in corporate America, accountability that starts at the top. Elena appointed a new director of equity and inclusion, a civil rights attorney with 15 years of federal litigation experience. Marcus was promoted to Director of Strategic Operations, reporting directly to the board, a lateral salary move pending his next review cycle, which placed him outside Elena's chain of command entirely and permanently. The promotion was not a gift. It was restitution 4 years late, $140,000 short, and exactly as honest as it needed to be. Within 6 months, on 31 of the 73 former complainants entered mediated settlement negotiations. The total compensation fund reached $2.1 million, paid from corporate reserves Elena personally authorized over the objection of 2 board members who were subsequently voted out. Marcus's evaluation framework, the 47-page document he had built 2 years before anyone thought to read it, became company policy. 23 measurable metrics, blind review, quarterly calibration. 4 Black employees received promotions for the first time in the company's history. Richard Barrett watched the news coverage from his room in Mooresville. He called Elena that evening, his voice broken and slow, each word a small victory over the damage in his brain. Proud of you. She held the phone against her ear for a long time after he went quiet, listening to his breathing, which was the sound of a man who had finally been forgiven for something he could not forgive himself. On a Saturday in October, 11 months after Elena Barrett looked at a metadata field and saw a name the rest of her company had overlooked, Marcus Cole sat on a park bench in Freedom Park, watching Maya pump her legs on a swing set. She was 8 now. The gap in her teeth had closed by 1, a new incisor pushing through at an angle that the dentist said would straighten on its own, and her science project this semester was about water filtration systems in underserved communities, because she was her mother's daughter in every way that mattered, and her father's daughter in the one way that mattered most. She believed that problems existed to be solved, not endured. Elena sat beside him. On her left hand, a ring, not a diamond. A thin gold band Marcus had purchased with 3 months of savings from a jeweler on South Boulevard who had asked if he wanted to see something bigger and received the answer that the size of a promise has nothing to do with the size of the stone. Elena had refused to let him spend $1 more. She wore it the way she wore everything, without apology, without explanation, as if it had always been there. Maya ran over, breathless, her braids swinging. Elena, did you know that Saturn has 83 moons? 83. That's more than most people have friends. Elena laughed. The kind of laugh that reorganizes a face and proves that joy is not the absence of grief, but its surviving neighbor. I did not know that, but I know someone who would have. Maya looked at her father's phone, at the lock screen that still carried Denise's photograph, that would always carry it. Mom knew everything about space. Marcus put his arm around his daughter's shoulders. She did. And she'd love that you're still paying attention. Maya sprinted back to the swings. Elena took Marcus's hand. The afternoon light came through the oak canopy in fractured gold, the kind of light that doesn't illuminate so much as forgive. She'd be proud of you, Marcus. He watched his daughter arc against the sky, small and fierce and reaching. She'd be proud of Maya. And I'm just trying to keep up. My boss asked me once why I wouldn't look at her. I told her the truth, because when I did, I forgot she was my boss. But that was only half of it. The other half is harder to say and took me longer to learn. I spent 4 years looking down because the world convinced me that was where I belonged. And then a woman I had no business falling for told me to look up. Not because she needed my eyes on her, because she needed me to see what I'd stopped believing was there, myself. 73 people were filed away by a system that counted on silence the way a house counts on its foundation, quietly, invisibly, and for so long that everyone mistook the silence for stability. We didn't repair everything, no one could, but we made the silence expensive. We made looking away cost more than looking at what was there. My name is Marcus Cole. I am a father, a director, a man who fell in love with a woman who inherited a broken institution and chose to tear it open rather than redecorate the walls. And when I look at her now, I don't forget that she was once my CEO. I remember that she was the first person in 4 years who told me to lift my head, not so she could see my face, so I could see my own.